check out what Ben said about the third quarter was.
A little bit here. I don't have the numbers exactly in my head, but I got it. I know what the third quarter says. Overall, third quarter was not good enough for us. I didn't watch every single snap from that particular quarter. We did go back. We studied the opening drive of the second half. We did do that. There's a significant difference from the first 10 games of the season to the last 10 games of the season and how we were in the opening drive of the second half. We were significantly better in the second half of the season, the last 10 games. I want to say those 10 games, we scored 5 touchdowns, which is 50% of your drives are going for touchdowns. You're doing something right. So I understand what's going on out there. I do think it was something we talked about, we addressed during the season, and we started to see some results as the season went on. So if you separate it up that way, I think we're trending the right direction.
Carlos.
Yeah, I mean, what more needs to release? He just addressed that. I mean,
I don't
down.
Actually.
What?
He shut it down. Like, he was just like,
no, actually, I like that answer, Boone.
Yeah. I think it was a great answer. I just think there's so many people out there who complained about the third quarter to where Ben just addressed it and said, okay, like, you want to complain about our third quarter? This is what we did in the second half of the season in the third quarter. Stop talking. Here you go. Here's the facts. And he just shut it down. It's interesting.
Yeah. Open up that can of worms. I mean,
it is fair to say, though, that they do need to be more consistent in the third quarter. I don't think there's any arguing that. And I think he knows that as well, because there would be times, especially when they'd get in the red zone, where they'd get a little too cute, where they would try to, at halftime, you could tell they make adjustments and they did a little too much. If they would have stuck to that game plan, now obviously the other team's defense is going to adjust, but sometimes they would get too far off the script and completely try to flip it compared to what they're doing in the first half. And they would go back to it. They'd realize, all right, shit, let's just go back to what we were doing. And they'd pick it back up. But I do think when you're playing teams like the Texans, I think when the Packers start getting hot again this year, teams of those likes, that third quarter has to be more consistent.
To be honest, too, he did just say, like, we looked at the opening drive of the third quarters. In the third quarters, you most likely have multiple drives. And I don't think it all just falls on the offensive side of the ball to where you're looking at, all right, let's take the opening drives out of there. Like, okay, you went 50% in the opening drives. What were those? Say you had 2 or 3 drives within the third quarter. Let's just say 2. What would those second drives look like? And what do those defensive, drives look like? Because, like, yeah, you could easily score a touchdown to open up a half. But then if you score a touchdown and then your defense instantly gives up a touchdown, and then an offense, you go 3 and out, and then the defense gives up another touchdown, that's a 7-point, like, that's 14-7 instantly. So, like, that could have been the third quarters down the stretch. And, like, the 49ers game, that's kind of what it felt like a little bit, to where, you have the fumble right away. You have like, it might not just be the opening drives of the third quarter, but it's more so, okay, we score. Like, how do we get a stop, and how do we how, like, Dan talks about opening the game up all the time with whether if you get the ball, score and then get a stop and then score, or if you kick off, get a stop, score, get another stop, and then go get another score. Like, that's how they should look at the third quarter, not just opening drives, but like, let's put 3 straight possessions together that are really, really good and put the game away. Like, go out there and get a score, get a stop, and get a score, and have a 14-0 instantly. Like, I think it's more so, and this is like Ben Johnson. I'm not saying I'm smarter than Ben Johnson, but let's look outside of just the opening drives. Let's see about the defense. Like, let's not just ask Ben Johnson this. It's not just the offense. Let's ask AG. Hey, do you guys look at the third quarter as well, getting stops and not being so slow coming out of halftime? Like, what do those statistics and analytics look like? So I think it's more so of a full team thing. I don't even think it's just maybe the offense, but it's more so of like a whole team thing coming out of the half.
Yeah, complementary football. You know, that it ties into that.
Spot on.
But at least what he was talking about, the opening drive, like, he had the day. There's not probably many on this team that watch more film than that guy. Like, so, like, I think the AG, Ben Johnson, like, those guys they watch so much film. I mean, Jared Goff obviously is another quarterback, but I think he knows what he's talking about. Like, if he said, but if we're talking entire third quarter, like, to Lucas's point, like, yeah, like, the opening drive
game. You guys remember that Saints game when they were up 24-21?
It looked great. That third quarter, shit hit the fan, and so, I see both sides. It was kind of slick. He just talked about the opening drive, which
I'm gonna start watching film. I'm locked in now. I mean,
I
I'd like to
honestly
watch.
thought, and
I'm about to
I
lock
could
in.
be wrong, but because again, it could have been transpired more in the fourth quarter. But I thought AG at least made pretty good second half adjustments, at least towards the back end of the season. But I never really remember getting mad at AG. I remember when he would switch up to zone coverage early on in the season, and we just be getting picked apart. And like the Thanksgiving game, I thought AG, at least with the second half adjustment, after that, he really stepped it up. Like games like the Bears, like I remember the Bears game when they were trailing, he really stepped it up in the second half. The defense as a whole did. So
I'm going to go through the
Definitely,
last
though.
second half of the season and the playoffs, and I'm going to see the drives outside of the third quarter drives. I'm interested to see the full offensive drives in the third quarter.
CAGs too, Boone, because I'm interested.
I'll check them all. Yeah, I'll go through probably tomorrow while I'm working or something, and I'll mark it down because like a lot of us do talk about the third quarter woes because it does feel like that. If you have a lead and you lose it, maybe it's not as bad as we think, and or maybe it's for Ben Johnson, he looked at those first. Maybe it's worse than he thinks. Like it could go both ways here. I mean, I'm interested. I'll go get the stats on it. I need to get all 22 back or my NFL Plus because I let it go for a couple months. I need to get it back so I can start watching some more games. Go break some of these games down.
Well, Ben also talked about how he chose to stay with the Detroit Lions, which I just think that's just like and this isn't a slight to like anyone in media, but it's a revolving just question. He's just always answering, staying, leaving. You can always count on every Ben Johnson press conference. There's probably one question about him staying and one question about him potentially leaving. So here is that question and his response.
How we were sailing down the ocean, and at that moment we were in the Arctic. We were hitting the icebergs. We had the storms going on, and I mean those were dark days. But he had the foresight, he had the vision of where we were going and where we were heading. He assured us, guys, I see it. I see where we're going. The results haven't been there yet, but the Caribbean is on the horizon. It's coming up. And I'm sitting on the plane, I'm thinking back to that, and just the story of my career has been living in that Arctic for a lot of it. That was the second time I've been to the playoffs. The first time I'd experienced winning games in the playoffs. I think when it boils down to it, I wanted the sunshine a little bit longer. That's really what it comes down to for me. I like the sunshine. I like what we've built here, starting with ownership, the head coach, the GM on down. We have a great group of guys in the locker room, and I want to reap the rewards with them a little bit longer.
He's a real one. Shout out!
Crazy to think.
That's a hell of an answer, by the way.
Yeah,
the whole ship in the Arctic analogy. I mean, what is this guy doing? That's and I think if you're Ben, and if you're anybody that's good at what you do, and this applies to all careers, you have leverage. You just do. You have a certain amount of leverage depending on how rare you are, how great you are at your craft. And Ben Johnson is someone that is elite at what he does in terms of being a play caller. I think he's up there with the best play callers in the NFL, most creative. I mean, there's teams that takes what he does and what he implements, which is a compliment. So if you're Ben and you're in a great situation with the Lions, unless even if there is significant historically just random regression, he's still going to get hired. Like someone's still going to want Ben Johnson. So he's pretty
sure.
safe. He's gonna get a job. Now, when you have leverage, you also get to dictate your destination, and he's not going to just settle for a job because the job's there. So there's also that. In the Lions, you get to return to a top offense, a team that's competing for a Super Bowl, players that you like, coaches that you love working under, like Dan Campbell. So yeah, like he's in a great situation, and he got a raise. It's like, yeah,
perfect.
He's living life. I mean, he doesn't have to take all the responsibility yet of a head coach, but he's still he's in his bag. He's a play caller. It's going really well. Him and Jared have a great relationship. Him and Dan have a great relationship. It's just, and he complimented ownership, which I think deserves to be mentioned as well. So big shout out to Sheila.
It's really interesting too, Jeff, because like the perspective that a guy like Ben Johnson has with the situation, a lot of the time you see coordinators as soon as they get an opportunity to become a head coach, because it's so hard to come by sometimes, is they jump on it instantly. And Ben did bring up today, like there was 8 job openings in the NFL, and he shout out to Ben. Me, I'm a gambling guy. He said, pick the over under. Where would you guys set the over under? on coaches that are staying with their job in the next 3 years, that head coaching job. And he set the over under at 4.5, and he said, I'll take the over and I'll take 5. 5 of those coaches in this coaching cycle probably will be out of a job in the next 3 seasons. And he was in his perspective is perfect, to where if he doesn't feel like he has the right like opportunity and he has the right franchise and ownership and team that's ready to go instantly for him to be able to go in there and be successful, why would he give up what he has now? Essentially, like, he's making probably low end head coaching money at right now as the OC in Detroit. So like, why would you give that up to go do something to where you're probably out of a job in 3 years? So it's great from him. And then he also brought the analogy up, just talking about, like, think about OCs that stay at their job and how good they get. And like, every year you stay as an OC, you're just going to continue to keep learning. And especially being around a guy like Dan Campbell, AG, Scotty Montgomery, Tanner, who am I missing? Kelvin Shepard, like all of these guys, you're around the best in the business. So like, just being around the best in the business there and being able to do that, it just keep getting better and better, to where when he does become head coach, and guys, him talking today makes me even think he might be here in 2025. Like, the way he broke it down was, hey, if there's not an opportunity next year, I'm not taking it. Like, I would rather win as an OC and go win Super Bowls as an OC than go to be a head coach and lose or fail. So like, I wouldn't be shocked if he's here in 2025 and just sit there and just wait on it. Think about how good and how much better he's going to get for the next 2 or 3 years if he continues to stay here and continues to grow. And like, when he does get that head coaching job, guys, if he continues to keep growing, he's going to be that much better. And he said, like, this year, I'm going to keep building up my resume, and I'm going to keep, like, on the side in my spare time, he's going to sit there and make sure he has every single plan ready to go when he becomes a head coach. So he's going to the preparation with it. I would not be shocked if he comes back next year as well after hearing that.
I mean, Ben Johnson, when the machine guns start firing and the mortars start falling, that's a dog I want in the foxhole with me. I mean, he does want to see this thing to the end. And I think it's highly optimistic to think that Ben Johnson will be here in 2025, but I don't think you can rule it out, because I think a lot of people and executives around the NFL thought Johnson was good as gone this year. And if the Lions don't get that Lombardi next year, it could be a very similar situation. But there's no losing when Ben Johnson stays in Detroit, just because he's only going to add to his future playbook that he can take to another team. He's only going to make more connection. He's going to be better leader of men. Just because Ben Johnson is very young, it's probably a lot harder for him to command a locker room compared to Aaron Glenn. At the end of the day, you need to be able to do that as a head coach. So it's going to allow him to mature more. And that's a great aspect of being behind a guy like Dan Campbell and being coordinators with a guy like Aaron Glenn, because he's learning from those guys every day as well. So I think Ben Johnson needs to stay in Detroit, at least for this year, for him to have more success. But to Jeff, your point, it's also going to allow him to dictate.
Yep.
Maybe I want to just wait and go play with Josh Allen. If they want to, if they win the division and they hang on to McDermott, all right, that's fine. But I'm going to go find somewhere else. I'll stay here until then. But there will be a quarterback job that Ben Johnson finds attractive. He'll be gone one day, but it's hard to tell when that's going to be.
Klotz, think about like a Matt LaFleur. Like, he went into a perfect situation in Green Bay. Ben's going to sit there. He probably saw that situation and is like, I'm just going to wait until something opens up to where I can go in and be successful right away. Why would I go from all this, like he said, the sunshine, to go right back into the Arctic and just go like instantly when I was just finally happy? Like, I'm not going to do that to myself. This analogy, I think this is a perfect analogy, fellas. And tell me if I'm wrong. I just thought of this. Like, the Ben Johnson situation's like let's compare it to ourselves here building like crunch time
or something,
like what we're doing. Like, think about, like, not like now, but like in 3 years when we're like, we talk about it all the time where we envision ourselves, and imagine if we're finally get there and we're on that level of national, and we have 100,000 subscribers and this and that, and we have all these sponsors, everything with it, and then like ESPN comes to one of us and is like, hey, we'll pay, like, say we're each making, a couple $100,000, and then ESPN comes, hey, I'll pay you $500,000 to do this. And it's like, oh, that's like whoa, that's the big leagues. Like, I'm going to become a head coach. Like, it's like becoming a head coach. And you're like, no, we went through the Arctic boys for the last 2 years, and we finally got to where we want. You're probably like, at least me, like, I'm gonna look at you boys and be like, hey, I'm like, I love this. We're in the Caribbean, boys, and we built this thing together. Like, until we get those $1 million offers, like, I'm here with the boys. Like, I think it's the same thing for like a Ben, to where, like, yeah, you want to become a head coach. He's gonna eventually do it, but dude, how old is he? 36?
Yeah, he's very young.
He's in no rush, dude. He could be here for the next 4 years and be happy with his life, I'm sure.
And he's a very, very calculated guy. And you got to think too, take the human element, kind of take that into consideration because he has a family. You know, he got now they're growing up. He has young children, so now they're you have to think of it in both ways. Like even for all men can relate to this. If you're taking care of your family, you're a top earner. You know, you're making good money. Like Ben Johnson, he's a top earner, and he's out there making good money. He's taking care of his family. That his kids are growing up in Michigan. Not saying he'll never leave, but it's not that urgency to him. Like he's not to relocate, go to another place where expectations are significantly higher, but also it's unfamiliar territory. I mean, ironically enough, the Buffalo Bills are kind of like the Arctic. I mean, it's cold as shit over there. All right, and he's going over there to a new organization. He's unfamiliar with the GM, the ownership. Here, he knows all of that. So he's not under pressure. He's not under any pressure to just go out and take a job simply because he has to. Some coordinators feel like they have to because their stock is at an all-time high. When you're good at what you do, great at what you do, you just think, I'm the shit. Like, I'm still going to be great. I'm young. And like he said, you want stability. That's what I think we all want. And that's why I think building this platform is so important because we have stability. This is ours, and it's different because it's not like the Lions are his, but in the same breath, he has stability, which I think is super valuable for anyone in any job.
Especially in this league.
If you like what you do and you're happy and you enjoy it and you're, all that stuff. But yeah,
especially in the league, dude. The league it's a brutal league to where you go become a head coach, you're out. He could be out year one somewhere. Like, the culture just doesn't work or something doesn't. His job security in Detroit to go win a Super Bowl for the next year or two is perfect.
Yeah, it's great. And he also answered the question regarding Josh Reynolds, who's replacing him. How do you make up for that production? So here is Ben Johnson's response to that.
With Josh, I mean, you've got some guys kind of waiting in the wings for more opportunities, but what's the biggest challenge, the biggest thing you need to replace with what was lost with his departure?
Yeah, that was eye-opening during the self-scout period, to be honest with you. He was an explosive play waiting to happen. A number of his receptions were big plays for us. So something we've talked about with the skill group, like those opportunities go elsewhere now, and we need guys to step up and rise to the occasion just like he did. It might be someone that didn't have as much production last year, say an Antoine Green or a Peoples Jones or some of the guys that we had on the scout team. That could be the guy, or it could be some of the other guy. Maybe it's another carry for Dave Montgomery or Gibbs, or it's another target for Laporta. It could be, we might have to spread it out that way. So that's what we're trying to find out here this springtime and in training camp, is not just who the guys are that we'll hang our hats on, but also how we distribute those carries and those targets.
Yeah, I mean, that's a coach talk, for basically these guys are going to compete. Whoever shows out the most, they're going to have to earn their targets. I still believe DPJ, he's going to be able to fill some of that void. I do.
I did think it was interesting him bringing up Laporta and Gibbs, though. Just say, like, hey, like those guys might get more looks than they did last year. Like Laporta got a lot of looks in some games. Like he would get 8 or 9 targets. And then other games it would be 3 or 4. Like, so I feel like that's going to be a situation to where that might increase in more games across the board. And Jeff, we talked about it earlier, the Gibbs situation, like that, you're going to see that increase in the DMOT, like these carries. Like might be more of a running back game to where you see out of the backfield in the slot. That's going to increase because you have to find production somewhere else.
I mean, in my opinion, it's got to be, from that comment, it's got to be JMO. I mean, if you look at what Ben just said, Josh Reynolds was a surprisingly explosive part of this offense. I think somebody just popped up as, Ryan. He says 15.2 yards per catch. So when you look at JMO, and especially how they used him towards the end of the season, I mean, even in the NFC Championship game, he called like a 12-yard touchdown. They were running crosses with him against the Broncos and Raiders. He was having success as far as making hands catch over the middle. So when you look at that and you look at Jameson Williams be the wide receiver too, I think by default, that's who it's got to be. And I think he's more than capable. And Doc was preaching highly on him as far as he's looking like a more polished wide receiver. He's still going to struggle with those hands, but you already know that. Dan's told us that. So if you want to just ignore it, you're going to keep getting frustrated. But Jameson Williams, that's him. That's all him.